And yeah, good to see everybody this evening. So tonight we have a very interesting speaker, Shaira. Thanks for accepting our invitation to come and speak to all these lovely ladies who belong to the YWSE, Young Women Social Entrepreneurship, sorry, where we come together as women to support each other, to cheer each other up on, to share ideas, and just to share all the different roles we do or we play, and you know, find out how can I do it better? What am I doing wrong? What my mistakes? What mistakes have I made? How can I correct that? How can I learn? And have a good time. We usually do this over an Indian meal, which sometimes is the key pool for the month. And sometimes, you know, always good to see new women share new journeys and experiences as well. So having you speak to us this evening is adding on to a lot of the knowledge that we all have and wisdom as well. So without going into much, who is Shaira? I'll give a little brief of yourself, and then you will do yourself justice by taking us through your journey. And yeah, tell us how you have done it all, you know, and all the roles you play. We know we as women, we are sisters, mothers, aunties, CEOs, home runners, home managers, all of those roles that we play. So share with us how you do it all. And for those who do not know Shaira, just a little bio behind who she is. She has worked with PwC for over 12 years, up until 2010, where she moved towards beginning Faraja, which is a cancer support center, a trust where up until now they have supported over 10,000 patients through cancer treatment for free, and continuing to do that in different ways. So I'm very interested. I've heard of Faraja so many times, and I have seen that you have a 5 for 5 challenge currently. So really interested to see not just how you've been able to do all of this, you know, be part of PwC for 12 years, and especially during your shift into, I'm going to put this on hold, to I'm going to take this up, set up this trust, see it through, and up until today, and how we as women can be part of that, and how we ourselves can also do something similar, right? So Shaira, it's up to you.
Thank you, Wanjugu. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. It's always good to be with women. I think they inspire me a lot, and having, I guess, gone through a professional life when I was your age means that maybe there is things that we can connect with. So I told Rima maybe the best way was to just tell my story of why I started Faraja, where I was before I started Faraja, and then maybe it's a small group, which is nice. So I'm really happy to have a discussion and just take questions as we go along or towards the end, whatever you prefer. Yeah, so in terms of my journey, I worked with PwC actually for 33 years. So that was my only employer. I think women of my generation stuck to one employer. These days you find people move around a lot. So I started with them in Dar es Salaam. I come from Tanzania. When I got married, I moved to Kenya, and then I worked with them initially in audit, and then I moved into tax, and had several regional roles as we moved into first East Africa, Central Africa, and then Africa. So in 16 years ago, just over 16 years ago, whilst I was still at PwC, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And fortunately, it was like early stage. I had the resources, support, etc., to go and have my treatment in the UK, and some of it here. So I did some in the UK, came back and finished the rest, continued working with PWC. During that time, had extremely supportive people that I worked with. I could take time off when I needed to, etc. So it was relatively, I guess, easy for me compared to what it is for a lot of people. So at that time I was 47, and our retirement age at PwC is 60, but I didn't need to work, fortunately, until I was 60. So I left when I was about 52, and wanted to do some social work, and I was thinking along the lines of kind of health or education. There was a new cancer center coming up. They were giving us space for free. And having had the experience I had, and having kind of realized that there was a real gap in support services for cancer patients. You could do the medical treatment, but it's all the non-medical support that was really lacking. So I thought I would, and they were giving us space for free. So that's when I thought about starting Faraja, just to support people through all the non-medical stuff that a cancer patient goes through. And whilst I was in the UK, I'd come across some centers, the likes of Faraja, and you find most of them are run on a charitable basis. It's not the hospital who runs them, because if you give it to a hospital, you find that it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. Whereas if it's a charity, and maybe, I guess, a survivor running it, you find that they're more successful. So when I started, I kind of thought about how I would structure it, what it would be like. And for me, it was quite important that whatever I started was going to be sustainable. So it was important that the board of trustees that I brought in was credible, were the sort of people who were really interested in the vision and the cause, and also credible, right? So because credibility is something that is very often questioned, rightly or wrongly, in Kenya. So 10 years, so we started 10 years ago, and we're kind of moved quite a lot in 10 years. We started with maybe seeing just a handful of patients a day. So what are the sort of things we do? We do quite a lot of therapies, and there's enough evidence which shows that if you support your medical treatment with, or complement your medical treatment with other therapies like exercise, massage, some energy-based healing, then your eventual prognosis will be better. So we do a whole lot of that. And then we do quite a lot of support group meetings. And right now, obviously, the physical support group meetings are on hold because of what we are going through, and cancer patients being in the vulnerable category. But we're doing quite a lot of stuff virtually and online. So in a support group meeting, typically, so if we do like 9 or 10 different ones. We do one for breast cancer, prostate cancer, cervical, head and neck cancers, young adults, because there are a lot of young, sadly, a lot of young people, including women, who end up with breast cancer. And then we do quite a bit at Kenyatta. So we have a program we run with the children. We do support group meetings for parents who have kids at Kenyatta. And in the last kind of 3 years, we've started a center in Eldoret. So why Eldoret? Because Eldoret has a cancer treatment center at the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital. So our vision basically is to follow where new cancer centers are starting, so that there is enough in terms of the number of people who would use our facilities. And about 4 years ago now, we started a medical fund. So it's like an endowment fund where our initial vision was to raise 100 million. And the income of the fund, investment income of the fund, was going to be used to support patients who didn't have money for medical treatment. So over this period, I think we've supported about maybe 300 or about 400 possibly now patients with their medical treatment. And so the vision is that every year we should be able to support at least 50 But now that NHIF actually pays for part of the treatment, I think the number will be more. So maybe it's about 100 a year that we'll be able to support for medical treatment. So yeah, I guess that's kind of our journey. I feel very blessed that I have had 16 years so far, and so many patients we see don't have that kind of time. So we also help people navigate. Now, a lot of cancer patients are really lost in terms of where do they go for treatment? Is the doctor they're going to telling them the right thing? So we kind of help them through some of those difficulties that they go through as well. I think when Jugu mentioned balancing your life, so I guess right now it's easy for me because I don't have a full-time job. All I do is oversees Faraja. Cindy was meant to join us. She's our fundraising manager, but we have a lot of, we have good staff. So we have a very good psycho-oncologist who's our patient support manager. Cindy is our fundraising manager, and then some really good staff, which means that I don't really need to be there physically all the time. I do what I can from home. So it's a very relaxed job compared to what it was when I was at PwC. So I was telling Rima earlier on that I think women today, so I guess I'm talking to this the new generation, are much better, I think, at balancing their lives than maybe I was or other people are. Because I see Sonia is shaking her head. Yeah, well, when I see my two daughters, I feel they balance their lives a bit better than I did. Where they, they set aside a little bit of time for themselves, and which I think I didn't do. So in terms of wellness, and when I kind of think back and think about cancer, why did I get? Oh, not why did I get it, but what is it that might have caused it? I think it's probably the stress, because I used to eat well, I exercised well. All that I would tick off as, when you look at the high risk cases, I would tick that off as being fine. But maybe everybody has stress, but it's your ability to manage it, right? So maybe my ability to manage stress at work, and then, the combination of kids at home and all that wasn't that great. So I think it's the bit a lot of people underplay, the mental health. And I just feel that's very, very important, because stress, I think, reduces your immunity significantly. And cancer cells are in your body all the time, but I think they manifest into something like serious when your immunity is low. So I guess for all of us, it's very important that we do what we need to make sure that our immunity isn't compromised. Maybe it's a point to take a break and take some comments before I kind of say more or questions.
I have one, especially you mentioned with PwC, that was quite a heavy undertaking. I'm thinking corporate, right? And then you had that shift into charity work. I mean, how long did it take you to take that decision? Did you struggle with that decision? And was it very clear for you that that is the path you want to take? And did you just go for it?
Yeah, I think for me it was, it took a couple of years. So I think I left 12 years ago. Faraja's been going for 10 years. And I guess the 2 years were, to some extent, thinking about it, thinking about who the trustees were going to be. And I was quite particular in the sense that I wanted a gender balance, I wanted a racial balance, so that, it was going to be a charity that people would respect. So we kind of achieved all that. We had a gender balance, we had a racial balance, and still do in our group of trustees. So all those sort of things, and by the time you get your trustees together, etc. And then I also went back to the UK to a charity like Faraja and spent a week there. It's run by a lady who's originally from Kenya, and she was very kind enough to host me for a week just to see what they did, how they did it, think about the therapies they were doing, whether they were relevant for Kenya, whether that's the sort of therapies Kenyans would appreciate or want to do. because there's obviously a lot of people feel some things are to do with religion and, you know, that kind of thing. So even like when we do yoga at Faraja, we don't call it yoga, we call it movement. Because when people think of yoga, they think it's to do with a religion. So when you say movement, more people will come to the class. Yeah, so no, I don't think it was too difficult. I think partly because of what I'd gone through. Yeah, and just also realizing that there was a gap. So when I was diagnosed, there was nowhere you could go and meet anyone who was going through the same thing. There was nowhere you could go and read. There was nowhere. So at least now what we've created, and when we are fully open, obviously we'd love to see some of you there. But we've created what is really a safe heaven. And that's what a lot of people who come to us say, that when they come to us, they can say what they want. If they need to cry, they'll come and cry, and they don't feel like they're in a place where people won't understand. Yeah.
So I was interested in your funding strategy for the center. I mean, I know you mentioned an endowment fund for the, you know, for treating the patients.
Yeah.
And you said that you aim to fund at least 50 patients annually. What about the center, you know, the running of the center, the day-to-day, the admin?
Yeah. Okay, so we do two main fundraising events as Faraja ourselves. So one of them is a whitewater rafting challenge that Rima mentioned, and that's usually in May or June. And that's where corporates, individuals form teams of 5. They do fundraising, and then that raises about 6 million shillings, and it covers about 6 months of our costs. Then we have what we call Kenya's biggest coffee morning, which we do in October, where we go to companies, schools, people host coffee mornings at home. And then we usually, depending on what they want, we'll go and talk about early signs of cancer. We'll talk about wellness and whatever else that somebody is interested in, or is a company they're interested in. And then people will donate, or the company will give us a donation. And then the other thing about cancer is that sadly, almost everyone's been touched by cancer. So whether it's directly or indirectly, you know someone who's gone through it. So people are I think it's much easier to raise money than it is for some other things. So, you know, if you talk about HIV, for example, you say, well, that's for someone else, you know, it's not me. But with cancer, it's like, you know, doesn't distinguish between age, race, you know, how affluent you are. I mean, you get it. So as a result, I think we're lucky. So someone who's gone through cancer, will just come and give us a check, you know, in memory of somebody. So fundraising hasn't been so challenging, but obviously in the last 6 months, it has been, because money is going to other more immediate needs like food, etc. Yeah.
Right. Thank
you.
So
Wanjuku mentioned the 545 challenge. So we decided that, you know, because we had to cancel our whitewater rafting, and this coffee mornings obviously won't happen next month. So we're doing this 545 challenge where you do something, a walk, a run, a bike ride, and people have done some really interesting things. So, you know, some people have done squats, burpees. So whatever it is that you feel comfortable with, and you give Faraja 500 shillings, post it on social media and tag 5 other people to do it. So we've kept the entry level low so that more people can join, but I'm really hoping that we have the numbers, because 500 shillings from 1,000 people will obviously take us a long way, that kind of thing, yeah. And we've started this like a couple of weeks ago. It's going well, but obviously we need a lot more in terms of, yeah, people supporting us.
Yeah.
So COVID aside, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced so far?
Challenges, yeah. Okay, so our model is very much around volunteers. So we have 7 staff, 1 in Eldoret, 6 in Nairobi, but we have maybe almost 100 volunteers. So half of those are therapists. So these are therapists who volunteer their time. So the massage, if you come to Faraja for a massage, you don't pay, so it's free, but the massage therapists are volunteering their time to us for free. So I guess getting a constant supply of therapists is sometimes a challenge. And then the other half of the volunteers are the ones who are either university or just finished university, and they come in and help us particularly with our craft program at Kenyatta, because we go to do craft with the kids, and there are about 300 of them every Friday, and go with a group of about 20 volunteers, because it's in several wards at Kenyatta that we do this craft. So yeah, getting a constant supply of volunteers is sometimes a challenge. And also I think maybe just the ethics with volunteers, you know, I think the center I went to in the UK, if a volunteer said she was coming from 9 to 2, it was 9 to 2. It was almost like they get an employment letter and they're expected to do that. I think here there is a bit of, well, I'm a volunteer, I can go when I feel like it and when I want to. Now that doesn't obviously work for us. So yeah, that's sometimes managing that is a challenge. But I think the other challenge is getting patients to know about us. So many people don't know. And when they do find out, they say, oh, I wish I knew earlier, because I know from my experience that the first 10 days of when you're told that you've been diagnosed with cancer is the most traumatic. Once you know what the treatment plan is, you kind of get on with it. But we don't get patients in those 10 days because somehow the doctors are sometimes reluctant to refer their patients. They feel you might take them somewhere else, and you know, that kind of thing. So that's also a challenge, yeah, getting patients to know about us and to actually come, yeah. The other thing, maybe I could just add, is that we would really like to have space and be located within Kenyatta, because that's obviously where most of the patients go. Where we are located near Mpisha is not ideal for patients from Kenyatta. But it's a real challenge, you know, the bureaucracy of trying to get space in Kenyatta and that kind of, so we haven't managed so far, but we haven't given up.
Just as an extension, you talked about volunteership. How do you go about it, and how would, say, members who would be looking into volunteering into the program, how would they go about that?
Yeah, so if somebody expresses an interest in volunteering, we would meet with them, and then we would try and figure out what's the best fit. Some people might say, I'm really happy to do stuff from home. I can't come into Faraja, and for us, that's fine. So if they have a particular skill set, say accounting, they can sometimes help us with some of our accounting stuff. Or if someone organizes events, and you know, when we have an event, we can call on them. But one of the things we try and make sure is that whoever is volunteering for the right reasons. Because sometimes you will have someone who's got a product they want to sell, you know, and then they will say they want to come and volunteer, and then we soon realize that it's actually that product that they're trying to sell, whether it's, you know, some energy-based, yeah, whatever, drink, or, you know, so we sometimes have to just be a bit careful. But most of the time, I think people are volunteering for the right reasons.
Janet, did you have something?
Yeah, I think just, yes, Shaira, thanks for that. I think just to pick on what you said about the people probably not getting to know about you at the right time. How have you been marketing yourself so far? What has been your strategy to reach out?
Yeah, so we do quite a lot on social media. Some of our events, like the coffee mornings we do in October, will reach about maybe 500, 600 people. The whitewater rafting will reach the same number of people. And for a while, we'd engaged an organization that was helping us with our media stuff. So we were trying to get into newspapers and all that. But I think it's usually word of mouth. So now more people know about us. People who come for treatment at the center where we are located, which is called HCG, on next door to MP Shah Hospital, know about us. But you know, it's people who are being treated at Kenyatta or being treated in Meru, for example, and most of them end up in Nairobi for, say, the radiotherapy, because that's Nairobi and Eldoret are the only places where you can have that. But then they won't know of us. And sometimes if they're going to Kenyatta, and even if they know of us, it's just too far for them to come. You know, when you've got, the center I went to in the UK, they realized that where they were was like maybe 5 minutes walk from where the cancer treatment center was. So still within the same hospital, but cancer patients wouldn't come. Because I think there's so much going on in your life there that you don't really want to get into too much. But when they opened just exactly where the treatment center was, people were coming because they didn't have to walk those 5 minutes. So you kind of just have to be exactly where the treatment center is. And for people to feel, you know how I think in Kenya and everywhere else, whatever your doctor says is like God's word. So if you are close to where your doctor is also based, you feel that maybe there's more credibility in doing all this other stuff. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so I think in terms of stress, I don't know what all of you do. I'm sure you've all got your own ways of dealing with stress, but some of the things that I kind of do now, maybe more so than I did 20 years ago, are things like I do a lot more yoga. I try and meditate because I feel the mind has such a big part to play. And our minds are so busy that we just kind of need to spend time in silence and meditate. So I find that really helps me. So yeah, and I think sometimes people feel that meditation is something that's difficult or it's not for me, but it's just sometimes just a question of sitting in a quiet place and following your breath. So it could be just so simple that anyone can do. So sometimes, like, you know, you realize that when your mind is very busy and there are birds outside, you won't hear them, but you quieten your mind and you'll hear the birds. So, you know, it's something, I think it's something very therapeutic, and it would be great if you could all try it a little bit. And then the other thing I think I've learned is if you do something for 21 days, it becomes habit. So persevere and do it for 21 days and it'll become habit.
I think we had this discussion pretty early. I wouldn't call it early. It was a month into COVID. And yeah, there's a lot of sharing about the different ways that we all manage stress. Like you said, yoga, there are people who take a walk in the forest or just take a walk. People who read books, others will listen to music. Yoga, as you said. Yeah.
Cooking as well, right? I think
cooking, yeah. Gardening, Rima mentioned gardening, which she took up and loves it. So yeah, it's I think, as you said, it's finding that thing that actually takes your mind away from all the noise, right? But I'm curious to know, what are some of those things you think about that you wish you knew 30 years ago?
Yeah, I think this thing about just taking self-care and taking care of yourself, I think it's so important, and you kind of underestimate how important that is. And sometimes and particularly when you're in a corporate world. To be honest, when I left PwC, you realize that there's another world, because for 30 years, you kind of didn't realize that there is this other world. And even though whilst I was at PwC, I'd gone through cancer, etc., I had no idea what the cancer scene was like, even in Kenya. It was only when I started Faraja and I realized, you know, the fact that people didn't have money for treatment, or 95% of the people, and in those days, NHIF wasn't paying for cancer treatment. So, you know, you kind of live in your own cocoon, and it's only when you break away from there that you realize that there is another life. And I was telling Rima earlier on that I think, you know, I guess when you're in a busy corporate world, you feel you'll give money for charity, but you really don't have the time. But I see now increasingly more people are trying to find time within their busy schedules to do some corporate social responsibility. I guess companies are doing that as well, which is great, because I think giving money is one thing, but actually giving time, I think, is more important. And it's more rewarding, because you can give a check and you won't really feel as rewarded as you would if you find some time to get involved.
When you speak of self-care, do you mind elaborating exactly what that entails?
Yes, I think it's just finding a little bit of time for yourself. So yeah, so it's all doing all those things, you know, like going for a walk once in a while. If it's a massage you enjoy, finding time for a massage. If you need your manicures or pedicures, you know, just making sure you set aside a little bit of time for yourself, and not all your time is for working, you know, your husband and your children and whatever else other commitments you have. Yeah, so I think it's very important to have this time off for yourselves, in silence and in whatever way, but just a little bit. Yeah, you'd be a better person even to the people that you are looking after.
Yeah. Anyone with a question?
I've got something I wanted to ask, and well, kind of like comment, but Shaira, you can elaborate. I know that you not only help cancer patients, but you also have some support for caregivers, or, you know, can you maybe speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, so very often we find that it's the caregivers who go through a difficult time, sometimes more difficult than the patient. Partly because I guess if you're not going through it, and if the person you're looking after is not communicating well, which very often they don't, then you could just imagining what they might be going through. So we reach out to caregivers quite a lot as well, because we feel that they really need support during this time, because I guess it's a time when just the word cancer, I think, makes people worried. And yeah, so our services, whatever we provide, whether it's a yoga class or a massage, there a caregiver is also welcome to come and use our facilities for free. Yeah.
And by caregivers, you mean the people that are taking care of them at home or in hospital as well?
Yeah, more at home.
Personnel. Okay, at home.
Yeah. But we do quite a lot for medical personnel as well. So particularly at Kenyatta, because sadly in the kids ward, there are lots of, the mortality rate is high, in which case, you know, the nurses and more so the nurses than the doctors, you know, who are there with the kids all the time are going through a tough time as well. So we do support group meetings for them as well and reach out to them. I think there's some questions on chat.
You've answered one of on the volunteer, volunteer network. But what do you feel about good mental health, not just for yourself, but, you know, for the patients, for the caregivers that you just mentioned, and then generally, you know, for women overall, or for everybody overall?
Yeah, so yes, I think all these things like the yoga and all in some way deal with mental health. But we have a psycho-oncologist at Faraja and several counselors as well. who try and help people through the mental health issues. So recently, the frontline staff at MP Shah, for example, and also I think the admin staff were all going through quite a rough time. So Philip, who's our patient support manager, got together a group of about 10 other counselors, and then they have been having sessions with online sessions with the staff at MP Shah Hospital. But yeah, so we have a group of counselors at Faraja on a volunteer basis who help patients through. And our staff as well actually go through quite a lot of anxiety because the patients who obviously been coming to us for a while, some of them don't make it. And then on our medical fund, we have a criteria that we use on selecting who we will support, because we obviously can't support everyone. We have limited funds. So the girl who runs the fund obviously has a tough job to do, because she's got to explain to some people that, sorry, we can't help you with your medical costs. So, you know, yeah. So we've got to try and make sure that our staff are looked after as well for mental health. Yeah. Not sure if I've answered your question, Wanjugu.
Well, partly, especially, you know, on the front line, which is you know, the main topic of the day. But like earlier, you had mentioned about how you've realized, like this generation is, you know, trying as hard as possible to sort of balance it all. And, you know, we probably didn't have that realization, you know, earlier. It was work, 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 and then everything else. But what do you think about this whole trend where there are a lot more people who are talking about it, who are, you know, constantly searching for ways to handle it on a personal basis?
I guess I think the real change that needs to come is people should see going to see a counselor as a sign of strength. But for most people, they see it as a sign of weakness. Mm-hmm. So even when we have patients who come to Faraja and we say, would you like to meet a counselor? They'll usually say no. But if you say, would you like to talk to someone? They'll say yes. So, you know, I think this whole thing about counseling and mental health, there's such a stigma attached to it. And I just feel that really needs to change. So in a way, it's about how it's communicated. Yeah. And a lot of, not a lot, some of our volunteers are actually cancer survivors, which helps. Because when a patient comes in and, you know, you say, I know how you feel, at least they know that you know how they feel. But if someone who hasn't gone through it says, I know how you feel, then you feel, really, do you? You know, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think the other thing I should just mention is this thing about late detection. So the real issue in Kenya about cancer is the fact that it's detected late. So I think about 80% of the cancer is detected when it's already advanced. So when it comes to leukemia in kids, for example, in Kenya, 2 out of 10 will survive. Places like the UK, it's 8 out of 10 who will survive. So I just feel, so our coffee mornings are kind of try to give those messages. And I think we all kind of need to just be very aware of the fact that we need to look after ourselves. If there are any changes, we kind of shouldn't ignore them, because cancer is treatable. I mean, I've had 16 years and others don't. So it's a shame, because I think everyone, particularly for breast cancer, where there's been a lot of research and, you know, they more or less kind of have a cocktail of treatment which works, but it has to have been detected early. And then you kind of need to look after yourself after that. It's not like, I think you really have to examine and see what things need to change. You can't kind of, after your medical treatment, say, well, things can go back to normal. They can go back to normal, but maybe with some changes, yeah.
So just to ask onto your point, so what are the things that, I mean, what would be like the first signs and how do you ensure that you're, because I'm somebody who never goes to hospital as often as I should because I'm rarely sick, right? But maybe there's something going on with me. So how often should I, or how often should we just generally go to hospital to make sure that we are keeping our health intact? I don't know if I'm making any sense with that question.
Yeah, as women, maybe go and see the gynecologist at least once a year, I would have thought. And then if you have a family history, maybe more often. In terms of some cancers have signs, some don't have signs. So for example, with breast cancer, obviously it's a lump, and that's usually the first sign. So self-examination is very important. For something like cervical cancer, which is also a common cancer in Kenya, it's things like bleeding, you know, and yeah, I could share those early signs with Rima, and then maybe she can share them. So for things like colon cancer, which is also a common cancer, it's blood in the stool. So, you know, anything that's changed from what you're used to, I think you have to always think about it suspiciously. So change in bowel movements and those sort of things. Yeah, for prostate cancer, it's things like, you know, the frequency of going to the toilet. So yeah, the different cancers have different signs. Now, the one that doesn't have or is very often mistreated is like stomach cancer. You know, people, if you hear of someone who's being treated for ulcer a lot and isn't getting better, then obviously they need to do something else because the symptoms are very similar. Now, ovarian cancer, which is obviously for the females, presents itself usually quite late because there's quite a lot of space, and the ovarian cancer can grow quite big before you start feeling it, but the sign is a feeling of blottedness and that kind of thing. Things like even if you suddenly find that you are getting really tired at the end of the day, you didn't before, you know, all those things can sometimes be signs of something more, I guess, yeah, could be signs of something else.
Thank you. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I'll remember to share these early signs.
Rima, you had a question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, or confirm rather, in cancer at Faraja or the cancer support place, do you offer like mainstream cancer therapy, or is it all alternative therapy? Because I did hear you say you have an oncologist, resident oncologist as well. So do you offer mainstream therapy, or is it just alternative therapies?
Okay, so at the center where we are located, we don't provide that, but MP Shah do the chemotherapy, and HCG provide the radiotherapy treatment. So we don't do any medical treatment. We just do, and we're quite careful not to call it alternative, but complementary, because so very often patients will come and tell us, do I have to do the medical treatment? Can I not just do all this? So a stand generally is that there isn't any research which shows that if you just do yoga, for example, you'll cure your cancer. But so we always say, do your medical, which has obviously got scientific backing, and then you complement it with all those other things, which will hopefully mean that even things like a positive attitude results in your medical treatment being more effective. Yeah.
Actually, just to add to that, maybe a couple of things. Does nutrition make a difference, for example, for the improvement? And then also for yourself, how did you, in your journey, did you do both the complementary as well as the main therapies for you to get, like out of the space of cancer? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, when I asked my doctor 16 years ago, do I need to make any changes in my eating habits? And he said, no, just carry on eating what you always eat. Now, I don't think there is strong scientific evidence on some of these things, but I think there is enough to tell us that good nutrition will help. because one of the things with good nutrition is it improves your immunity. So if your immunity is better, then obviously there's a better chance that, so you know, as somebody who's had cancer, your biggest worry is, will it come back? So once you've had it and you've had your medical treatment, what you're now trying to do is to make sure you don't get it again. I mean, or do what you need to do to reduce the chances of getting it back again. So I'm quite a firm believer that nutrition is important, but it's not about, like, you know, some people will say, don't eat any meat, no sugar. I mean, I have sugar, I have meat, but I have everything in moderation. Yeah. And what was the other question? Yeah, whether I did both. So I did, yeah. So when I was first diagnosed, I had a friend who believes in a lot of stuff that's done in India. And he told me that there was this particular French guy in India who was producing this particular kind of medicine. If I had, I don't know, 3 drops every day, I didn't need to have all this other treatment. But you know, when you're diagnosed with something that's life-threatening, which cancer is, then obviously you kind of don't want to take those risks, and you go by what has scientifically been proven. And sadly also the drug companies have money, so perhaps all these other things would work, but nobody will fund the research to show that combination of nutrition and yoga can cure cancer. So there is no research that backs these sort of things up.
I think they do say that if you have a, like you said, you know, the good attitude, the strong attitude, the mental capacity, if you believe, for example, I mean, there's like a lot of our, and they've, I think there's part of the scientific methods that they've actually used to see that you can overcome a lot of things from just that as well. By believing, by knowing, by keeping a strong mind, you know, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is faith, huh? I guess people who pray, you know, are religious, and you've got to continue doing that, because I think that has a big role to play in those people who believe, you know, in religion and who believe in God. Yeah, we sometimes have people who feel that now that I've had cancer, perhaps there is no God, and you know, gradually most of them will go back and go back to their faith, which is very important.
Janet?
Yes, I think I'm just going to pick up on, you mentioned India, and I recall seeing some doctors who used to come to Kenya to kind of just try to help people do testing for free. And it makes me think that some of the reasons why we don't, most of the people don't access the hospital is also the amount of money that is required to just do testing. So, you know, if you just feel like you have some issues, you don't, the first thing you want to do is just like treat yourself before it gets worse. So, and you know, you're really not treating because it could be something else. But so I wonder whether there's enough people who can offer these services just to try and, or whether they're influencers that can help testing for free, in, you know, like having camps at particular times. I don't know what you think about it. I'm just curious to see like what kind of change that can be done to improve the situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because, you know, I think if there was good screening, a lot of the cancer would be detected early. So there was a time we were running a campaign with Nakumat, and in October they were raising money. The tagline was, "Let's fight this battle together," and people were donating points and money at the till. And we did like, I think, screening in about 10 different counties. But the challenge with screening is that if you screen and then people are diagnosed, you need to have the funds to support the treatment. So we only did it when we knew we had money for treatment. Now, there are some organizations who are doing some screening. There's a group called Women for Cancer, who do screening for cervical cancer. And then there are a few others. But it's very haphazard, and it's when they have funds. So the government really should have a screening program like they do in other countries. And if they did, so I think in terms of the cost of treatment, Janet, you know, if you treat yourself or if you get treated when it's early, the cost is a fraction of what it is if it's advanced. So for example, breast cancer at early stages might cost you, the chemotherapy drugs say might cost you 30,000 per cycle. But if it's advanced, you're talking of like over 100,000 per cycle because the combination of the drugs changes. So I think that's another thing a lot of people don't understand, that, you know, the earlier it's detected, the earlier it's treated, the cost will also be less. And obviously the outcome is likely to be much better.
Yeah. I think the main challenge is, you know, you go for a small test and you pay a dime for it.
Yeah.
Like right now, I think the hospitals, because they're not getting enough patients, they're actually doing irrelevant tests. So people are just generally scared of just visiting the hospital for any checkup. So
yeah, that's true. There's a lot of that here. Unfortunately, yeah, the doctors will do tests. So I guess the question always to ask is, what is this test going to, you know, sometimes you hear of someone who's having a CT scan and then you say, well, the results of the CT scan, are they going to change the treatment that the doctor is going to give? And it's not. So in which case, why do the CT scan? So yeah, you're right. People are doing a lot of tests. And then particularly, I think with this NHIF scandals and all, doctors, yeah, if they know that they can claim under NHIF, they'll make you do all the tests that are not even necessary.
Yeah.
So one just needs to, you know, like when I was going through my treatment and on the website, and I think you can still pick this up, there were questions. If you're going to see your breast cancer surgeon, these are the questions you will ask him. When you go to see your oncologist, these are some of the questions you might want to ask them. So I think it's important that, so that's one of the things we do when patients come to us. We tell them at your next visit, you might want to ask your doctor these questions. Why are you saying I should be taking this drug? So, you know, I think it's important, but yeah, I think Kenyans don't like to ask their doctor and the doctors don't like to be asked, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think Grace has her hand
It's
up.
true, Grace, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi guys, I came a bit late, but at least I've gotten something. Now, in this country of ours, you say it correct, everyone has had someone who has suffered. I've been caregivers, people who are affected. So I had this opinion. Kenyans are just generally afraid. You'd rather be tested for anything else apart from cancer. The moment someone mentions the possibility of that, you freak out. You prefer not to have it tested because you're like, okay, I didn't know, so I don't need to know, you know?
Yeah.
What can we do about that? It had the same thing was happened when the country first got to know about the HIV. And it took a lot of strength, a lot of campaigning, a lot of everything for people to actually be able to go for a HIV test without having to fear much. You say, okay, fine, if I get it, I'll do this. If I don't have it, well and good, I'll take care. Now, even right now, even if you told me to go have whatever, if there's a chance that I'm going to get a test or to find out if I have any cancer, I freak out. I will not lie. This pap smear, we're supposed to go for it once a year, but I won't lie. Every time I go for it, I have to take a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Try to convince myself. When I get there, I'm arguing with the doctor. Do we really need to do it? You know, you're afraid of what you don't know. That's natural. So what happens? What are we going to do about this thing? Because there are sometimes we offer, there are times there are clinics. I live in Kilifi. There are times when I see people have workshops to ask ladies and women here to go for a pap smear. People, first of all, don't understand what that is. It's a rural setting. Secondly, you're told you're going for a pap smear so that you can test if maybe you have any signs of cervical cancer, and that's the switch off button. It does not go on from there. That's it. You'll never see them unless you follow them in their houses, you know, and you cannot do anything by force. So what do you think we can do about this thing? Especially, yeah, you get me?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I think there's a lot of education required. There are quite a few organizations who are doing it, but it's still not enough. Maybe a lot of it is centered around Nairobi. So for example, there's an organization called Kenco, which is an umbrella organization of all the charities or non-profit organizations doing stuff around cancer. So most of them are about the same age as Faraja. So I think all of us kind of started about 10, 11, 12 years ago, some a bit more recent. And they're trying to pass some of these messages. Now, you know, there's been a lot of debate recently about the vaccine for cervical cancer. Yeah, now we know that if you are vaccinated, you won't get cervical cancer in some countries. They've eradicated cervical cancer, but there's so many myths about whether it affects your sexual life, whether you'll be able to have kids. Now, I think all those things they've done the research required to show that none of these things will be impacted, but still, there are lots of lobby groups who are against the vaccine. And the government was going to roll out this vaccine this year, but I think, well, with COVID, obviously, they've had to slow it down. But I think even when they do roll it out, there will be the same sort of thing where people won't want to go, even though they're giving it out for free. But yeah, you're right. I think people, like, even after you've had cancer, Grace, you don't want to go for tests because you don't want to hear that you've got it again. So I think that fear is always there, even before you got it and after you got it.
Yeah, I have a relative who actually she has cleared it. She's been cleared, but as you said, the greatest fear is it's gonna come back. It's like a nightmare. For every day she lives, the first thing she thinks about is if this thing comes back, it's gonna come back and I'm not gonna be able to fight it. Yeah. And we look at her and we all freak out. For one reason or another, we are freaking out. We're trying to be there for her, but at the same time, we are freaking out inside and you're thinking, oh my God, it can get anybody, you know. Yeah. But we take hope that she has actually beaten it. So, well, we can beat it too. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is where I think our support group meetings are quite powerful. So in our breast cancer support group meeting, we've got about maybe 4 or 5 ladies who had it 25 years ago. So they're there, you know, when you go into a support group meeting and you meet people who've survived for 25 years, someone like me who survived for 16 years, it kind of gives you hope. And one of the things we try and do at Faraja is to just give people hope that, you know, if you've got it early, you've had the right treatment, then, you know, you've hopefully be okay. And there are so many people who've done well. So I think maybe it's for more of those sort of people to be speaking and to say, you know, I caught it early, I went through my treatment and now I'm fine. Yeah.
What
So
I'm
when
hearing,
So when we go to these coffee mornings in October, we usually go with someone who will give a testimony. And basically the testimony is about, you know, talking about their journey and then trying to give hope to people who've either got it or have a relative who's going through it.
That's good.
So how do you get a support group? Because I think, like, you know, to Grace's point, with her relative getting stressed about it, and to your point, when you began and you talked about how stress does affect your cancer cells, I think that's what you said. So how do you get support? How do you get a support group? Is there like a structure in place out there that, you know, that maybe people don't know about?
So at Faraja, we have some that we do on a regular basis. So every month on the 4th Tuesday of the month is breast cancer, 2nd Tuesday of the month is cervical cancer, etc. Yeah, so that's Nairobi and Faraja. In other places, Philip, who's our psycho-oncologist, has helped them set up support groups. So Nanyuki, for example, wanted to start one. So he went and started one. In Eldoret, we have 2 or 3, I think, support group meetings that we hold. And I think in Kilifi, there's a lady who's quite active. So I might try and put Grace in touch with her. What cancer does your relative have, Grace?
She had breast cancer.
Okay, so I'll put you in touch with this lady in Kilifi who's very active, and I think she is doing quite a lot around either breast or cervical. But you know, yeah, in terms of how do you start a support group, it's really just a few people. So Kiambu, for example, has a support group, and there's a survivor called Margaret who just kind of gets together people who've gone through it, and they meet once a month, they chat, they'll have a cup of tea together. And it's things like, you know, when you go to a support group meeting and you meet someone else who's going through chemotherapy, and she tells you she is having these side effects, and you know you're having the same side effects, straight away you are not alone. But when you don't go to a support group meeting and you're going through this stuff alone, then you think it's just you who's going through some of these things. So I think the power of the support group meeting is to know that you are not alone, and other people who are going through it. Now, my inspiration, for example, when I was diagnosed is, when I went to England, one of my friends finished her treatment. So that was like 9 months she was diagnosed. When I went and I saw her and I had lunch with her, I kind of thought, well, I can be like that in 9 months. So, you know, straight away you have hope. And I always tell people that when you diagnose, you just have to remember that there's a period of inconvenience. And after that period of inconvenience, you can go back to a normal life. Well, it's never going to be normal because you've obviously had something that's happened. But, you know, in our support group meeting, if you ask people on what cancer taught them, they all say they've come out stronger than they were before they had cancer. So it actually, in some ways, makes you a better person.
Yeah, I can get that.
Yeah. It's a complete shift in the system, you know, in everything exactly. That you do, you priorities. Yeah.
And things like letting go of little things, you know how we let little things bother us. Now those little things are no longer important.
Yeah. I think what you see as I don't know how much of that you're doing right now, given the social distancing in terms of support groups. What do you think the future is going to look like, especially for Faraja?
Yeah, I think COVID. Yeah, post-COVID. Yeah, so I guess we kind of just have to take a day at a time. Right now, we're doing whatever we are doing virtually. That's obviously a challenge for a lot of people who can't join in, you know, can't get the right internet, don't have money for the bundles, and those sort of things. The positive side is that a lot of people who couldn't come physically to Faraja because they're located in Kisumu or Meru or Embu can now join our virtual meetings and webinars and benefit, because before we weren't doing anything virtually. The other benefit has been we've been able to bring really good speakers from overseas for our webinars. Before we were kind of restricted to people who are available and in Nairobi. So I guess there's a positive and some which is not so positive. I think post-COVID and when we can have patients back at Faraja, we'll definitely do a combination of both, because there's obviously a whole group that can benefit if we continue doing things virtually. But the physical contact and meeting people face to face obviously has its value as well. So we will as soon as obviously the government says it's okay, and we feel it's safe enough to have some patients coming, we will restart our support group meetings.
Awesome.
And then our therapies, a lot of our therapies are hands-on therapies. So, you know, whether it's a massage, whether it's Reiki, we do things like body talk, yoga. Now, yoga we're doing virtually, but there's nothing like being in the same room and sharing the energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I actually like the element that people can still join, because I guess like even if you're in Nairobi, still traveling, meeting can be expensive sometimes. So especially for patients who've already spent a lot of money. So I think having an element of combining both might be a good idea even for future.
Yeah. And also, if any of you know of people who want to join any of our support group meetings or anything we are doing on the webinar, please, you'll find our contacts. I think Rima has put some on the chat, but do ask them to join, because there is obviously no limit of how many people can join these things, and some of them have been really very good.
So as I'm looking at the time, and we have a few more minutes, and just one or two questions in terms of tonight we're about 8 ladies, but we have a network of about 4,000, and it would be good to know, for example, with all the different sectors represented within the YWSE, how can we get involved, whether it's volunteership or towards how Faraja sustains itself. So perhaps you could speak a little towards how you're able to sustain yourself, and how you see the future, especially given the big shift that we've had this year.
Okay, in terms of where we are in finances and sustainability, I think we're lucky that we're okay. So even though we know that our 2 main fundraising events for this year are not going to raise money, we feel we can sustain. We haven't had to ask staff to leave. So far we are fine, but obviously we can't be complacent. So this is why we are doing this 5-for-5 challenge, etc., and hoping that we can at least raise enough money to meet our expenses for this year. And going forward, what we want to do is we have our endowment fund for the medical expenses, which is fine. It's going to keep on running forever, because we only use the income of the fund to support cancer patients. So our 100 million or 110 million is intact, and it'll stay intact. One of the things we really want to do is have an endowment fund which will look after our running expenses. So if we come to another COVID, we won't have to be too worried, because we'll have an endowment fund, and the investment income of that endowment fund would meet our running expenses. Now, I think to get that going, we obviously have to do one-off fundraising. So we'll do that when the time is right. The other thing we would really like to develop, which is not such a common thing in Kenya, is regular giving. And maybe that's where your organization can come in. Like in places like the UK, regular giving is very common. People have been giving like £10 a month for 20 years to a particular charity. It's a standing order. It comes off. You don't even miss it, and you even forget that you're giving that money. So if we get to that kind of situation where we know that we have regular givers who are giving us, for example, 500,000 shillings a month or 1 million shillings, it obviously takes away the strain and makes our sustainability more sure. Yes, that was one question. What was the other one? You had 2 things.
Part of it is, as you speak about that, is for us members to look into how we can also be part of, whether it is spreading the word or volunteering or just being part of this, and also give us your take on the few things that it takes to set up a social impact say if some of us are trying to move our companies into that direction, some tips that we can take home today.
Okay, so I think in terms of spreading the word, that's really great, because if you have 4,000 members and if each member was to refer one patient to us, we would be delighted, because it means we can then support 4,000 patients in whatever way. It might not be medical treatment, it would be even things like just coming to use our complementary therapies. So yeah, that would be amazing. So if 4,000 people knew that we are there and can refer one patient or one person who they feel could benefit from the services we provide, that would be amazing. And then, yeah, you were saying in terms of taking away, I think some of the things I mentioned earlier, you know, I think make sure you have good people behind it. So when you go thinking about who you want to be, who you want to involve in your social program or in the charity that you're setting up, make sure that there are people who are respected, because that's very important, because otherwise, you know, the money won't come easily. People, like for us, I think that's our strongest point compared to a lot of the other cancer charities, that we are credible. And then also, you know, whatever you do has to be consistent. There are a lot of other charities that are doing work, but it's very erratic. They'll do a camp when they have money. For us, you know, when we plan our programs for the year, we know we have money, otherwise we don't plan them. So we kind of make sure that we have the funds for the programs that we say. And so our monthly support group meetings always take place. It's not like this month it didn't take place because we didn't have the funds, or, you know. So I think that consistency is very important.
I'm curious to know as well, like on your board, how many people do you have, and what's the percentage of women represented?
Okay. So we have two, I guess, important groups. Well, important is not the right word, but we have two groups of people who are kind of on the strategy side. So our board of trustees has 3 women, no, including me, 4 women and 3 men. And
Rima.
yeah, so there's myself, there's a lady called Sonal Sechwa, she's a lawyer. There's a lady called Harriet Wanjoy, she used to be a consultant before. We worked together actually in PwC. And then there's a lady called Noel Orata, she's a pathologist. She's a more recent person who's joined. And she's really great, because we didn't have, the other thing on the board to be careful about is to make sure that you have the right skill sets. So we found when we were bringing in a new trustee, we wanted 2 new trustees, that we actually didn't have anyone with a medical background. So Noel's actually doing an amazing job there. So we have a lawyer, and then in the men, we have a guy called Andrew Hollis, who's our chairman. And he and I used to be at PwC together as well. He's a consultant. And then there's a guy called Andrew Degwa, First Chartered Securities, or this NIC Bank, that group of Degwas. Now he is very useful to have because he has good connections. You know, they want a bank, they want an insurance company. So, you know, we get a lot of pro bono services because of his connections. So he's useful. And who's the third one? And there's another guy who's a recent one. His name is Hashim, and he brings the technology aspect. So yeah, so that's our board of trustees. And initially we had Manu Chandaria, but he's recently stepped down. So Manu Chandaria was a good person to have because everybody knows him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have a panel that looks at the applications that come to us, and that includes people who are not trustees. So there we have 1 or 2 people who bring in the right skill sets. And also for that particular one, we really have to be careful because we don't want people to think we are only approving applications of a particular tribe or a particular gender. So we've got to be seen to be very fair. Otherwise, it's one of those things that could really make it difficult for us.
Mm. Wow. I'm thinking about coffee morning for YWSE, and I'm wondering, how do we go about that?
Yeah, so we
Just
could
tell him
do.
my question.
Are you meeting physically or not?
Virtually for now.
Yeah. And then how will we serve coffee?
Everybody just makes a coffee before we meet. And
Bring your own coffee.
bring your own coffee.
But I thought the puller is the coffee, no? People won't attend unless you offer them something.
Yeah. But yeah.
Maybe when COVID is over, we can do a coffee morning.
Over, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And with this weather, I tell you.
Lots of teas and coffees are going down at the moment.
So
Yes.
Reem, is there a small write-up we can do for you to share with these 4,000 members?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
we can put it on.
maybe something really short.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what we can do is, if it comes from you, so we'll draft it in a manner in which you could say this is what we can do for Faraja, and even if it's just to introduce one patient or to refer one patient.
Sounds good. Yeah, we definitely can do that.
Especially because, like Grace said, there's fear behind anything mentioned, revolving around cancer. So I think if it was sort of, are you curious, information-based, knowledge-based, because I love the idea that it's making cancer, just another thing, like a common cold, when you have a cold, you can't hide it. But we're very comfortable to say, I have a cold. And if more people are more comfortable about speaking about it, then I think it would go quite a long way towards even managing it, Yeah. So ladies, anyone else with something pressing for the night? Something you want to ask Shaira before she leaves?
Maybe just one final question, Shaira. So you mentioned the therapy sessions for the caregivers. Do you normally have like group therapy sessions, or how does that work? Like, for instance, the families who are living with the patient, the cancer patient, the affected patient. I'm sure to some extent, everyone who's living with somebody who is, going through cancer is, impacted. So do you do like a group therapy session for the family, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it very much depends on, like, when Philip will meet with them first time, he will try and assess whether there's a need to have a family together. Sometimes there are little kids involved, and then it's a good idea to have everyone together. So yeah, he would do a group therapy session for families, and we have done some. But sometimes it's one-to-one with the patient or one-to-one with the caregiver. So it very much depends on what the need is. But we would do whatever is
so you assess the situation and then decide. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes the rest of the family just don't want to come, and it's really sad, but sometimes the family will tell you, but we haven't told her she's got cancer.
Oh,
so they wouldn't even have told the patient. So you just have to be very careful, but which is very sad, because I think if I had cancer and I wasn't told that I had cancer, I'd be very upset.
Yes, of course.
Good to know, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, ladies and Shaira, thank you so much for taking the time tonight to come and learn, to come and share. And I think for me as well, I have had family having gone through it. And it's interesting that every time you speak to somebody, it takes you, it reminds you again that there's so much that needs to be done, and I think conversations need to be had. And so, Shaira, we don't take this for granted, your time, with all the knowledge that you've shared. And also to the ladies, as Shaira said, let's share all of this information that we've learned, and somehow find strength, Grace, find some strength to face this. And in that way, we can really beat it. So thank you, Shaira. Thank you, ladies, for the evening. And don't forget to check out Faraja support, cancersupport.org. Tell your friends, your family. We've shared her number right there as well. We've recorded today's session, and yeah, we'll share anything else. We'll share the recording after this on the group. And yeah, have a lovely evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And Rima, you can, I think I can unmute everybody, so we can all at least, no, you have to do it, Rima. No, yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to do it. I think most people are unmuted.
Yes, so I think we're all unmuted, so you can say goodbyes, good night, and thank yous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shaira.
Good night. Good night,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you for making it
Good
tonight.
night.
Thank you.
Good to see your faces.
Good night and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.